Pressure on the electoral victory, Boris Johnson's promising to move quickly to take the UK out of the EU. Earlier, he said he vowed his government would work around the clock to deliver Brexit in the new year.
On Monday, MPs will arrive at Westminster to form a new parliament. And I'm proud to say that members of our new One Nation government, a people's government, will set out from constituencies that have never returned a Conservative MP for 100 years. And yes, they will have an overwhelming mandate from this election to get Brexit done, and we will honour that mandate by January the 31st.
January the 31st. Get Brexit done. There is the clock. It's been the mantra of Johnson's campaign since the beginning. And we've seen 2 Brexit deadlines come and go so far already. Now it looks like the Prime Minister will succeed. After all, if he can't do it now, you're never going to do it to take Britain out of the EU on the 31st. In reality, the day Britain walks away on the beginning of the divorce, well, nothing really will happen. On the end of it, nothing happens, because the transition begins until December 2020. That's when the messy details of any exit will be negotiated. And Johnson has until June to extend this transition period. He wants a trade deal, and 10 months simply might not be long enough to do it. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the EU will make the most out of the time available.
The United Kingdom and the European Union, we face so many challenges that we have in common globally, and where we share the approach, where we share interests and where we share values, that it is in our common interest in both entities to come to a very good new relationship in an orderly way. So we go step by step, but in an attitude that says we want to be good neighbours.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump says the United States is ready for a trade deal too. He's calling bigger and more lucrative than any deal between the UK and the EU. Speaking earlier, he championed Boris Johnson's win and the possibility of doing business with Britain.
I want to congratulate, he's a friend of mine. It's going to be a great thing for the United States also, because it means a lot of trade, tremendous amount of trade. They want to do business with us so badly. Under the European Union, it was very, very hard for them to do business with us.
Now, join the conversation. Get out your digital devices and go to cnn.com/join. And the question is, which trade deal is more important to the new British government, the EU or the US? cnn.com/join. At first blush, it obviously seems like it'd be the EU. It's the closest. But if you look at the growth in traffic, and if you look at the closest neighbour in the sense of the ease of doing business, might it be the United States? Mark Littlewood, especially on the services question. Mark Littlewood is with me, the Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Richard.
You'll answer that question at the end. But before we go too much from that, Brexit will happen, but there is this negotiation now with the EU in 10 months. Can it be done?
I think it can be. You need to be a bit optimistic to think that 10 months is going to be enough. The bit we've pretty much resolved now is the details of our departure. We know what our exit's going to look like. How much money is the UK going to hand over to the EU for all of the joint projects we've been working on? That bit's been fixed. So if you like, the divorce is fixed. But what's the future relationship going to look like? That's still on the table. And we've got less than a year, really, to sort that out. We could extend again, but I think people are sick and tired of that procrastination. So can it be done in a year?
Right, but you have to accept, do you not, that it can't be what you had before, which is market access, single market, customs union.
Well, it clearly can't be that. Otherwise, what would be the point of leaving?
No,
you might as well stay in it.
Right, but what I'm saying is you can't have all the benefits and none of the responsibilities.
That's right. This is a game of trade-offs. The more aligned we are with the European Union, the more, for example, we agree to follow their rules or keep those simpatico in some way, well, that helps keep trade with the European Union relatively frictionless. But it then limits your room for manoeuvre when you're discussing trade deals with, say, the United States of America or other Commonwealth countries, because you've already agreed to one block of regulatory rules, which you then can't put on the table when you're dealing with the rest of the world. So you've got to see it as sort of playing multi-dimensional chess. There's one game with the European Union, there's another game with the USA.
Can the UK do it?
Well, I hope so, and I think so. It's going to require us to up our game enormously, because over the last 3 years, the British government's shown itself completely incapable of playing single-dimensional chess, let alone balancing off various different chessboards at once. So it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. It does actually put the destiny in the UK's own hands. We're about to find out whether the UK is capable of mastering that destiny.
On this question of one nation Tory, I've got a list here. Rother Valley, which has been Labour since 1918, Lee since 1922. Some of these seats, Wakefield, 32. Some of them have never been anything like Rother Valley, but Labour, they are now, their electorate are expecting protections on things like welfare state and the welfare state and, for example, the health service that the Tories might not have offered in the past.
Well, we're presuming that to some extent, and certainly Boris Johnson's opening statement is all about the National Health Service. We can now move on and get that done. This is going to be the big question, I think, for the Conservative Party. Traditionally, over the last 30, 40 years or so, it's been the affluent southern middle-class areas that have tended to vote Conservative and the poorer areas in the Midlands or in the north that have tended to vote Labour. That's sort of been flipped on its head at the moment. The Conservatives didn't do well in affluent areas, did well in relatively lower income areas.
Because of the Remain question. But that will not be an issue, of course, in the next election. So how does Boris Johnson come up with simpatico policies for those new MPs and those new things that doesn't destroy the traditional concern? I mean, what does it mean to be a one-nation Tory when it comes to the NHS?
Well, that's a very good question. Everybody uses this term one-nation Conservative, but I don't think there's a book of political philosophy that you can buy that defines it. I think what it means is this, though, that what Boris Johnson means by it is he's not going to try and govern in the interests of a particular identified geographical or class group. He's not going to try and govern in the interest of the affluent middle classes, for example, or in the interest of the South, or in the interest of the City of London. He's going to try and find policies that have universal impact. I think that's what he means by it.
Do you believe the NHS, it's safe in the wider sense, it's not going anywhere, but do you believe the NHS will thrive under this government?
I think that the NHS needs startling reform. If you throw more money at anything, you can probably improve its performance. But underlying it, I think we've got much to learn, probably less from the USA and more from Europe, about how to actually run a successful healthcare system.
Now, don't look at the screen. If I'm going to ask you, which is more important? Which trade deal is more important? The UK or the EU or the US?
Spot price right now, over the next 5 years, I would say the EU. Over the next 5 to 10 years, the European Union matters more. Over the next 20 or 25, more marginal.
But for the moment, you and the wise viewer agree.
Well, that's good to know.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, Richard.
Please do come back again. We need you some more.